Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Awesome. So this time we're tackling sustainable digital marketing.
Ooh, yeah, that's a big one.
It is, right? It feels like there's so much to consider. Luckily, you sent over a bunch of really interesting articles, even a YouTube video, to help us break it all down.
Sounds like you've been doing your homework. Any surprising discoveries so far?
Honestly, yeah. Like, did you know that data centers could be using like 8% of the world's electricity by 2030?
Whoa, that's a scary thought.
Right. And, get this, that's basically the same as powering every single home in the U.S. for an entire year.
Uh,
Crazy, right?
it really puts things into perspective. We think of digital as being clean and eco-friendly, but the reality is all our online activities have a real impact on the environment. We can't ignore that.
Totally. It's like, I knew my website needed energy to run, but I never really thought about where that energy was coming from or what it was actually doing to the planet.
And it's not just websites, right? It's everything. Every email we send, every video we stream, every Google search, it all adds up.
Yeah, and speaking of emails, this one study I found said that even a short email can create like 4 grams of CO2.
Wow. That's more than I would guess.
Me too. And when you think about how many billions of emails are flying around every single day, it starts to get a little scary. Might need to rethink my reply all habit after this.
Maybe we all do, but honestly, where do we even begin to make a difference with all of this? It's a lot to take in.
Right, I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed already.
It's definitely complex, lots of moving parts, but maybe one of the most impactful places to start is with your website.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's often the first thing people see, right?
Yeah,
Like your digital storefront.
exactly. So it can really set the tone for your whole brand sustainability story.
Okay, so how do I actually make my website more sustainable?
Well, one big thing you can consider is green hosting.
Greenhouse.
Yeah, so instead of using those traditional data centers, which often rely on fossil fuels, you can go with a provider that uses renewable energy sources.
Oh, I get it. So like choosing renewable energy for my house, but for my website.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And many green hosting providers are taking it a step further, too. They're investing in energy-efficient infrastructure, things like servers designed to use less power.
Cool.
Some even have carbon offsetting programs to try to neutralize their environmental impact.
So it's not just about switching the energy source, it's about a whole approach to minimizing that footprint.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to be extra sure, you can even look for certifications like the Green E certification. It basically verifies that the provider is meeting certain standards for renewable energy.
Like a little stamp of approval.
Exactly. Helps you make informed decisions about your hosting.
That's super helpful. I'm starting to realize there's a lot to think about.
There is. But honestly, even the smallest steps towards sustainability are a good thing. You don't have to get overwhelmed and do everything perfectly right away. Just start with some gradual changes. Be open to learning as you go.
Okay, that makes me feel better. Small steps, big impact, right?
Exactly. So green hosting is a great place to start. But there are other aspects of your website to consider too from a sustainability standpoint.
Really? Like what?
Well, the design and functionality of your website can actually make a big difference in its carbon footprint.
Seriously, how does that even work?
Think about it this way. The more data your website needs to load, the more energy it consumes. So if your site's got like tons of huge images, fancy animations, and all those unnecessary scripts running, it just takes more power.
Huh. Never thought of it that way.
Yeah, so a streamlined, efficient website is not only good for user experience, it's also good for the planet.
A win-win.
Exactly. That article you sent, what's the carbon footprint of your website? It's got a bunch of good tips on this. Things like optimizing your images, using efficient coding practices, even choosing a light color palette and simple fonts. All these little things add up.
Wow, it's amazing how even the tiniest design choices can make a difference.
It's all about being mindful, right? Paying attention to the resources we're using.
Right. And thinking about the content itself, I was reading about sustainable content marketing, and it seems like creating high-quality, valuable content can actually reduce our environmental impact.
That's interesting. How does that work?
Well, the idea is that if your content is super helpful and answers people's questions right away, they won't need to click around as much.
Yeah.
And that means less data being transferred, less energy being used.
Makes sense. Making every interaction count for both the user and the environment.
Exactly. So it's not about churning out content just to have something new. It's about being more strategic.
I like that, quality over quantity. And the Driving Growth Responsibly article, it calls this evergreen content, right? Stuff that stays relevant and valuable over time.
Oh, right.
So you're not constantly having to create and consume more and more content.
And it even mentions repurposing existing content, finding new ways to share that good info without starting from scratch every time.
Smart. It's like we're seeing a theme here. Efficiency, optimization, making the most of what we've got.
Definitely. And it sounds like that same principle applies to SEO too.
Oh, absolutely. Sustainable SEO is all about focusing on that long-term value organic growth, not just chasing the latest trends or trying to game the system.
Okay, so how does SEO play into all of this? I'm curious.
Well, think about traditional SEO. It often involves like constantly chasing keywords, churning out content to rank higher, even if it's not really that helpful or relevant to your audience. And that can end up wasting a ton of energy and resources.
It's kind of like fast fashion, but for the digital world, right?
Right. Huh. That's a great analogy. Just constantly creating and consuming without thinking about the long-term impacts.
Yeah.
But sustainable SEO is more like slow fashion. It's about building a strong foundation, focusing on quality over quantity, creating content that truly resonates and has lasting value.
I like that.
And it even goes deeper than that. It's about the tools we use, too. Some of those keyword research tools are super energy intensive, you know? They're constantly crawling the web, generating massive amounts of data.
Wow. So it's about being mindful of our digital footprint,
Yeah.
even when it comes to the tools we're using behind the scenes.
Absolutely. And being willing to question those best practices, even if everyone else is doing them. Just because something is common doesn't mean it's the most sustainable option.
That's a good point. Definitely makes me want to rethink my SEO strategy a bit. But, all this talk about being mindful of our impact, it made me think about our audience.
Oh, yeah. What about them?
Well, that stat from the YouTube video really stuck with me. The one about 73% of UK consumers understanding the importance of sustainable products.
Right.
It just shows that this isn't just a niche thing anymore. People are really starting to care about this stuff.
Exactly. It's mainstream. And it's only going to become more important as we move forward.
So it seems like businesses really need to start prioritizing sustainability, not just for the planet, but for their own success too.
I think you're absolutely right. Consumers are becoming more aware, and they're choosing brands that align with their values. Brands that are transparent about their practices, committed to making a positive impact.
That's a powerful message. I think we've covered a lot of ground with websites and SEO, but there's still so much more to explore.
We've barely scratched the surface, but I think we've laid a good foundation.
Okay, I'm feeling inspired and ready to tackle the next layer of the sustainable digital marketing puzzle. What's next on the agenda?
All right, let's move on to social media. I know you've been thinking about how to make it more sustainable. It's a tough one, right?
It is. It feels like, every share, every scroll, it all contributes to that energy consumption. But at the same time, I can't imagine marketing without social media these days.
It's definitely a balancing act. You want to harness that power of social media while minimizing the environmental impact. And one of the first things to consider, according to the Driving Growth Responsibly article, is really being picky about which platforms you're using.
Oh, interesting. So it's not just about being on every single platform just because everyone else is.
Right. It's about being more strategic. Ask yourself, where does my audience actually hang out online? Which platforms are the most aligned with my brand and my message?
Yeah, makes sense.
You might find that you can have a bigger impact by focusing on a few key platforms rather than spreading yourself too thin.
Quality over quantity. I like it. But how do I know which platforms are actually the most energy efficient? Is there a way to measure that?
That's a great question. And honestly, it's something that researchers are still working on. It's complex, right? But choosing sustainability. The power of sustainable social media marketing in business points out that different platforms have different energy profiles. It depends on their infrastructure, how much data they use, even user behavior. So, for example, a platform that's all about video content is likely to have a higher carbon footprint than one that's mostly text-based.
So it's not just about how much time I spend on each platform, but also the kind of content I'm using, both creating and consuming.
Exactly. And it's about looking at what's happening behind the scenes, too. How energy efficient are their data centers? Are they using renewable energy? Do they have carbon offsetting programs in place? You can often find this info in their sustainability reports or on their corporate responsibility pages if they have them.
Okay, so do my research and choose platforms that align with my values. Got it. What else can I do to make my social media marketing more sustainable?
Well, similar to your website, optimizing your content for efficiency is key. Think about things like The size of your images, how long your videos are, even how many links and hashtags you're using. All those little things can impact how much data needs to be downloaded and processed.
Okay, so it's like those website optimization tips, but for social media.
Mhm.
Smaller images, concise text, keep it streamlined.
You got it. And remember, it's not just about minimizing the negative, it's also about using social media as a force for good. Use it to promote those sustainability initiatives and inspire positive change.
Right, instead of just posting about products and sales, I can share educational content, highlight other eco-conscious businesses, celebrate people who are making a difference.
Exactly. And the Sustainable Social Media Handbook has some amazing examples of brands doing just that. Running interactive campaigns, partnering with environmental organizations, really using their platform to amplify those voices for good.
That's awesome. So social media can actually be a force for positive change, not just a source of, like, mindless scrolling and energy drain.
It absolutely can. And it's a great way to build community with like-minded people and businesses, people who care about sustainability, who are trying to make a difference.
This is so helpful. I'm definitely getting some great ideas for my social media strategy. But before we move on, we can't forget about email marketing. It might seem a bit old school, but it's still a big part of what I do.
It's definitely not going anywhere. And actually, email marketing can be a pretty sustainable channel if you approach it the right way.
Okay, I'm all ears. How do we make email more eco-friendly?
One simple but really effective step is to just shrink your email list.
Oh,
Yeah. Driving growth responsibly made a good point.
yeah.
Sending emails to people who aren't engaged is like leaving the lights on in an empty room. It's just wasteful.
Huh. I never thought of it that way. It's like I'm paying to power those empty inboxes.
Okay.
So how do I know who to remove? Just delete anyone who hasn't opened an email in a while.
Well, not necessarily. Some people might not be opening your emails right now, but could still be interested in what you have to offer. So the source suggests maybe sending a re-engagement campaign first. Give those inactive subscribers a chance to opt back in or update their preferences.
That's smart. A little nudge before you hit the delete button.
Exactly. And another thing you can do is optimize your emails for efficiency, just like we talked about with social media and website design.
Got it. So use lighter images, streamlined designs, clear calls to action.
Yep. Minimize that data load. And Sustainable Email Marketing, a guide for green businesses, recommends using plain text emails whenever you can. They use way less energy to send and process than those fancy HTML emails with tons of images.
Interesting. I always thought the visuals and fancy formatting made my emails more engaging. But maybe simple is better when it comes to sustainability.
It's worth considering, for sure. And be mindful of the links and attachments you're using, too. Encourage people to communicate digitally. Link to online resources, use cloud storage, that kind of thing. Don't send huge files as attachments if you can avoid it.
Yeah, that's easy enough to change.
Mhm.
Instead of attaching that PDF, just include a link to it online.
Exactly. Small changes can make a big difference. And remember, it's not just about technical stuff. It's about using your emails to promote sustainability, too. Educate your subscribers, inspire them to take action.
Right. Aligning my email strategy with my overall commitment to sustainability.
Exactly. And be transparent about it. Let people know you're making an effort to be more eco-conscious with your email practices. It builds trust.
I love that. It shows them you're walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Speaking of walking the walk, let's talk about events. I know you've been wondering how in-person events fit into the whole sustainable digital marketing picture.
Yeah, it feels a little tricky. How can events, with all the travel and physical resources involved, actually be sustainable?
It's a big question, for sure. And actually, 5 tips to reduce the carbon footprint of your events had some pretty shocking stats about this. Like, did you know the average conference attendee creates over 170 kilograms of CO2 emissions just from traveling to and from the event?
Oh, that's a lot. So what do we do? Just stop going to events altogether?
Well, that's one option. And, a lot of your sources pointed to the rise of virtual events as a more sustainable alternative.
Yeah, those virtual conferences and webinars are definitely becoming more common.
Right, and for good reason. One study found that switching to virtual conferences can cut carbon emissions by as much as 94%.
That's huge. So are virtual events the future?
They're definitely a big part of it, but your sources also acknowledge that there's still a lot of value in those face-to-face interactions, for building relationships, collaborating, creating that sense of community. It's hard to replicate that online.
So it's not an either-or situation. It's about finding the right balance.
Exactly. And if you do decide to attend or host an in-person event, there are tons of things you can do to make it more sustainable. Like choose a venue that's committed to eco-friendly practices. Offer plant-based catering options, promote carpooling or public transportation, little things like that.
And driving growth responsibly even mentioned offsetting the event's carbon emissions.
Right. By investing in renewable energy projects or something similar, it's all about applying those same principles we've been talking about, efficiency, conscious consumption, to the event world.
Definitely seeing the connections here. It's amazing how this all ties together.
It is. And it's about shifting that mindset, right?
Right.
Moving away from just accepting things as they are and actively seeking out those more sustainable alternatives
Uh-huh.
in every area of our lives, including marketing.
I'm loving this. But there's one last area we haven't touched on that I'm curious about. Data and analytics. I've been reading about the environmental impact of data, and it seems like something people don't talk about enough.
It's definitely a hidden culprit in the whole digital sustainability conversation. We think of data as this intangible thing, but it actually requires a lot of energy to collect, store, and process all that information.
So all those spreadsheets and graphs I love so much, those are actually contributing to my carbon footprint.
I'm afraid so. Those data centers where all that data is housed, they use a ton of energy, and a lot of them still rely on fossil fuels.
Oh, wow. I honestly had no idea the impact was so significant. So how can I make my data and analytics practices more sustainable?
Well, a good place to start is by just being more mindful of how much data you're actually using. Do you really need all of it? Is it all actually informing your decisions and driving your strategy?
That's a good point. I tend to track everything just in case. But maybe it's time to simplify and focus on the metrics that really matter.
Exactly. And once you know what's essential, look for ways to minimize the storage and processing footprint. Things like data compression techniques, deleting unnecessary data regularly.
Good tips.
Oh, and choose analytics tools that prioritize privacy and data minimization. What's the carbon footprint of your website? I had a whole section on that.
Data minimization, what does that mean?
It basically means collecting only the data that's absolutely necessary for what you're doing. Some tools track and store way more data than you actually need, but there are tools out there that let you customize your data collection settings so you can reduce your overall data footprint.
That makes sense. It's like decluttering my digital life.
Exactly. Get rid of all that extra data that's just taking up space and wasting energy. And speaking of decluttering, you might want to take a look at the analytics tools you're using. Some platforms are specifically designed with sustainability in mind. That article, 5 Best GA4 Alternatives for 2023 Sustainable Website Analytics Tools, had a good list.
Sustainable analytics tools. What makes them different?
Well, a lot of them use data centers powered by renewable energy. They also prioritize data privacy and security, so they're collecting and storing less data overall. And some even have features that let you track your carbon footprint in real time so you can see the impact of your analytics practices.
Wow, that's really cool. It's like they're taking all the principles we've been talking about and applying them to the analytics world.
Exactly. It shows that people are really starting to think about this stuff and coming up with innovative solutions. It's pretty exciting.
It is. This whole conversation has been so eye-opening. I feel like I'm starting to see sustainable digital marketing in a whole new light. But there is one term I keep coming across that I'm still not quite clear on. Greenwashing. What exactly is that?
Oh yeah, greenwashing. It's basically when a company tries to make themselves look more environmentally friendly than they actually are. They might make misleading claims or exaggerate their sustainability efforts just to appeal to consumers who care about those things.
Ah, I see. So it's like saying you're a sustainable company, but still using those energy-guzzling data centers or engaging in unethical practices behind the scenes.
Exactly. It's all about authenticity. You have to walk the walk, not just talk the talk.
So how can I avoid falling into that trap? It seems like there's a fine line between promoting my sustainability efforts and, like, overstating my impact.
It's definitely a balance. But your sources really emphasize the importance of honesty and transparency.
Okay, so no vague statements about being eco-friendly without backing it up with real evidence.
Right. Be specific about the steps you're taking, the goals you're setting, the progress you're making. And it's okay to admit that you're not perfect. You're still working on things.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's about the journey, not about pretending to have it all figured out.
Exactly. It's about being genuine and committed to continuous improvement.
I like that. Okay, I'm feeling a lot more confident about how to approach this whole sustainable digital marketing thing. But one last question about those UN Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. I saw them mentioned a lot in the articles, but I'm still not quite sure how they relate to digital marketing in a practical way.
That's a common question. It's easy to see how the SDGs relate to things like Poverty, hunger, clean water, those big global issues.
Hmm.
But how do they connect to websites and social media campaigns?
Right. It feels a little abstract.
It might seem that way, but it's actually pretty straightforward. Every business, every organization has a role to play in achieving those goals, and your digital marketing efforts can be a big part of that.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Give me some examples.
Well, take Goal 13, climate action, for instance. We've already talked about how digital marketing can help reduce carbon emissions, right?
Yes.
Optimizing your website, choosing green hosting, all those things. So by doing those things, you're not only reducing your own impact, but you're also showing your commitment to that goal.
I see. So it's about aligning our actions with those global goals and using our marketing platforms to spread the message.
Exactly. And it's not just the environmental goals. Think about Goal 8, decent work and economic growth. You can contribute to that by supporting fair labor practices, using ethical suppliers, creating job opportunities in your community. Your marketing can reflect those values.
This is so cool. We're shifting from just focusing on profit to thinking about people and the planet too.
That's the whole idea behind sustainable digital marketing. It's not just about reducing the bad stuff. It's about using our skills and resources to create positive change in the world.
I'm totally on board with that.
That's great to hear. And remember, you don't have to do everything at once. Just start small, pick a few areas to focus on, and go from there. Every little step makes a difference.
Okay, that makes me feel a lot better. I'm excited to start implementing these ideas. But what about promoting my efforts? How do I tell my audience about all the cool things I'm doing without sounding preachy or like I'm just trying to jump on the sustainability bandwagon?
That's a great question, and it's something we'll definitely dive into in the final part of our deep dive. We'll explore how to tell your sustainability story authentically, build trust with your audience, and hopefully inspire them to join you on this journey towards a more sustainable future.
Can't wait. But for now, let's take a minute to just soak in everything we've learned so far. This has been a lot. Okay, ready to wrap up this deep dive into sustainable digital marketing? We've covered a lot of ground, from websites to social media, email, even those sneaky data centers.
It's been quite a journey, but I think we've laid a solid foundation. Now it's time to shift gears a bit.
Yeah, from minimizing the negative to actually using digital marketing as a force for good. That's the exciting part, right?
Absolutely. Instead of just playing defense, we can use our skills to actively promote sustainability, inspire change.
I love that idea. But to be honest, I'm a little nervous about, coming across as too preachy.
I get it. No one wants to alienate their audience. But the key, according to the Sustainable Marketing Playbook, is authenticity.
Authenticity.
People can spot a fake from a mile away, you know? They can tell if you're just jumping on the bandwagon because it's trendy.
Totally. It has to be genuine.
Exactly. It has to be woven into the fabric of your brand, a true reflection of your values.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do I actually communicate my sustainability story in a way that feels authentic and engaging?
Well, your sources had some really great examples. Remember that Dove campaign we talked about? The one encouraging people to use more positive language about beauty on social media?
Oh yeah, hashtag speak beautiful.
Yeah, they were able to subtly weave in those eco-friendly messages within a larger campaign about self-esteem and empowerment.
It wasn't just a green campaign, it was about something bigger.
Right, so it's about finding those natural connections, those subtle ways to integrate sustainability into your brand's story without being too heavy-handed.
So instead of just telling people to buy my eco-friendly products, I can create campaigns that encourage them to make more sustainable choices in their own lives.
Exactly. Inspire them to support ethical companies, you know? Think about the bigger picture.
It's about changing mindsets, not just pushing products.
Exactly. And it's not just about content either. Your sources talked a lot about the power of interactive campaigns, user-generated content, those community-driven initiatives.
I love that. It makes sustainability feel more fun, more engaging, like something people want to be a part of.
Exactly. It's about turning those passive consumers into active participants, people who are excited about making a difference.
This has been incredible. I feel like I've gone from feeling totally overwhelmed to feeling like genuinely empowered to make a difference.
That's the best feeling. And just remember, you don't have to tackle everything at once. Start small, find what resonates with you and your brand, and build from there.
You're right. Small steps, big impact. That's what we've learned today, right?
Absolutely. And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you're feeling as inspired as we are. Now go out there and make the digital world a little greener.
One click at a time,